Folks, you're going to hear a lot of people out there with very attractive arguments saying that you don't actually need to file a Form 1040 with the IRS. You're not required to do that. They can't throw you in jail for not doing that. Well, they do. Okay, and I made videos about can you go to jail for not filing your taxes, and link to that video is at the top of the screen. But today I want to look at a comment from a user or a visitor or viewer. Oh, why did I shrink us? Are you free? Are you sure? Okay. Now, okay, just for some context here, a while back, I made a video, I think responding to an "Are you free? Are you sure?" comment. Maybe it's somebody else's, called, is it illegal to not file taxes? What law requires you to file taxes? Okay. Okay, and I brought up Internal Revenue Code section 6012, right? Return to the respect to income taxes shall be made by the filing, and I explained all this stuff, about the standard deduction and everything, and who needs to file. And okay, next question is, okay, what's a return? Well, then I went to 6011, and which says, when required by regulations prescribed by the Secretary, any person made liable for any tax imposed by this title or with respect to the collection thereof shall make a return or statement according to the forms and regulations prescribed by the Secretary. And of course, the 1040 form is the form prescribed by the Secretary, the Secretary of the Treasury, and by extension, the IRS. And an astute person may say, well, it says, one required by regulations prescribed by the Secretary. Well, you look at the regulations for 6011, and it says basically the same thing. Every person subject to any tax or required to collect any tax under subtitle A of the code shall make such returns or statements as required by the regulations of this chapter. Okay, so there are regulations for it. And it says use of prescribed forms. Okay. And the prescribed form is the 1040. Now, some will say, as Are You Free, Are You Sure says, where are the regulations that state the 1040 tax return is required form? See, it's just trying to trick you. Here, let's read the whole thing. It was your comment. You're welcome. So nice of you to respond to my comment. However, Mr. Logan, you failed to cite any law that rebuts what I said. Okay, fine. I said there is no law that requires Americans to file a 1040 tax return. Yes, there is. 6012 says who needs to file. You need to file. 6011 says that you need to file. You file a return according to the forms and regulations prescribed by the Secretary. Okay? And the form prescribed by the Secretary is the 1040 form, right? And they could change that next year, right, to be the 2027 form. I don't know, whatever they want to call it, because the code and the regulations have delegated authority to the Treasury Department to determine the form that people need to file to be in compliance, okay? You referenced 6011, where it says that those who made liable for any taxes by this title shall make a return or statement according to the forms and regulations prescribed by the Secretary. Yes, I did. Yet, where are those regulations that state the 1040 tax return is a required form for Americans? It doesn't say the forms in the regulations prescribed by the Secretary. It says the forms and regulations prescribed by the Secretary, okay? You can get rid of and regulations here, and the statement could stand on its own, okay? This is the way these things are written. Okay, so the meaning is this: shall make a return or statement according to the forms prescribed by the Secretary and according to the regulations prescribed by the Secretary. Okay, if this said the forms in the regulations prescribed by the Secretary or the forms described in the regulations prescribed by the Secretary, you would have a point. But nowhere in here does it say that the specific form number, has to be in the regulations. It just says forms prescribed by the Secretary and regulations prescribed by the Secretary, the forms and regulations prescribed by the Secretary. Okay? You're trying to twist the words here and draw out a meaning that is not evident from the plain meaning of the text. You did not cite one federal tax regulation that cited a requirement for Americans to file a 1040 tax return. That's because there are none. I agree. That Form 1040 is not in the regulations. Okay? The statute and the regulations have delegated the authority for whatever to determine what that tax form is and to give it a name, Form 1040, to the Secretary, and by the extension the Secretary, the Treasury Department, by extension the IRS. Okay? Right. So you do not, right, I didn't cite any regulation or statute that says 1040 in it. Okay? And no, I don't need to look at anything else by this. Okay, fine, but just to go along this train of thinking. That leaves what Treasury says. I don't need to show you a Treasury decision. It doesn't have to be an official Treasury decision. It doesn't say that the Secretary of the Treasury has to issue a specific Treasury decision to prescribe a form that you need to use to be in compliant with making a return according to 6011. Nowhere does it say that. Okay? Nowhere does it say that I have to cite any of this. The Treasury Department has prescribed the 1040 as the income tax return for people to use. Okay? Nowhere in there does it have to say that the exact form number has to be in the regulation, in the statute, or in a Treasury decision. Okay? This is something you're coming up with. Yeah, I'm sure there are Treasury decisions that say that non-resident aliens should use the 1040 tax return. I mean, maybe in certain circumstances, like usually it's the form 1040NR. Here, I'll pull it up for you. Where NR literally stands for non-resident, right? 1040 NR U.S. non-resident alien income tax return. But I'll take you at your word that that's the meaning here. Okay. So I don't need to read these because it doesn't say that the form needs to be in a Treasury decision. Okay. So you see how these people are tricky, right? And I made a video. It should be it would already have come out by the time this video is published about what's his name? The Cheek versus United States case. Cheek was an intelligent guy. He was a major commercial airline pilot, right? To get a job like that, they make a lot of money too. You got to be pretty smart, right? Even he was persuaded by, and this was in like the late 1970s or early 80s, by groups basically saying these same things, these kind of very sophomoric arguments, right? Trying to kind of use words, and if you don't read carefully, you don't think clearly, you could see how people might be sucked into this stuff, right? You don't actually know how to read this stuff. You could see how people would be very persuaded by arguments similar to the one in the comments, right? But that's why you got to know how to read this stuff before you go take some cockamamie position that I don't have to file taxes. Like John Cheek did. And what happened to John Cheek? I think his name was John. Was it John? Yeah, it's John Cheek. Well, he went to prison. And after he got out of prison, he said he learned his lesson. Okay? So, I'll leave you folks with that. You can believe what you want, right? You can believe what you want if you want to believe something that results in you ending up in prison, that's on you. That's on you. Folks, if you owe the IRS or your state at least $10,000 in back taxes, or you have multiple years of unfiled tax returns, you qualify for a free consultation with us here at Choice Tax Relief. Just give us a call at 866-8000-TAX. That's 866-8000-829. Or you can go to choicetaxrelief.com, fill out the form on the website, and we will reach out to you. I have some other videos here on the left-hand side of the screen about can you go to jail for not filing your taxes, and can you go to jail for not paying your taxes, and more specifically, federal prison. All right, folks, thanks so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.